The comments, views, and opinions expressed in the podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views of Point72 Academy. All information provided herein is for informational purposes only, is not investment advice, and should not be deemed as a recommendation to buy or sell securities. All investments involve risk, including the loss of principal. This podcast does not constitute an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to purchase any security or investment product. Any such offer or solicitation may only be made by means of delivery of an approved confidential offering memorandum. This podcast may not be copied, and it may not be distributed or furnished to or used by anyone other than the intended recipient without the express written consent of Point72.
I'm Jamie Goodfriend, Director of the Point72 Academy. Welcome to Becoming a Hedge Fund Analyst inside Point72 Academy. The Point72 Academy is our investment analyst training program designed to teach you how to apply the fundamentals of finance to the market. Each year, we receive thousands of applications from students and professionals across the globe looking to receive a coveted offer to join the Academy, where they can hone their investing skills inside the classroom and with our portfolio managers before earning an analyst seat at our firm. In this competitive pool of applicants, you might be wondering, how can I stand out? Preparing for the Point72 Academy is a lot like being an analyst. You start with a limited amount of information, try to figure out what you need to know, organize a way to get there, and then figure out if you're on the right track. You don't need to have majored in finance or business or economics. You just need to tackle problems, breaking them down into smaller pieces and figuring out what works. If you're interested in joining the Academy, there are a few things you can do to prepare. We have a reading list on our website. Pick out a book and see if the way stocks tell the stories of businesses is interesting to you. My favorite is Mike Mobison's Expectations Investing. There are many others, though, that are up there too. Then, pick a few stocks to follow. You don't need to invest any money or do any deep analysis. Just try to keep up with the news and learn how their business reacts in a changing world. If you're really interested, it's easy to set up a paper account in Excel or use an app. Give yourself a budget, allocate it to the stocks you're interested in, and see how your ideas play out. You might find out that you really enjoy it. But you don't want to hear all of this from me, so we've invited 3 Academy associates, Victor, Sherry, and Martin, to tell us how they prepared for their time in the Academy. From developing an interest in investing, to acing the interview, to the work they did in advance so that they could hit the ground running. Joining us as our host is Brian Mulvihill. Brian was a member of our first Academy class in 2015, spent several years as an analyst, and today he's an Academy coach, preparing new generations of talent for an investing career. He knows what it's like to be in the Academy, to do the job of a long-short analyst, and what we teach our interns and associates to prepare them for a career with us. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you for tuning in. I'm Brian Mulvihill, and I'll be leading today's talent discussion. My background is fairly traditional. I began with a year of banking at UBS before joining the inaugural class to the Academy. I started my analyst career on a team here, which ultimately spun out as its own fund in 2017, is where I spent the remainder of my analyst career. After reflecting on what I wanted to do next, including a few conversations with Jamie, a great opportunity arose to return to the firm as a coach and help lead us into a new chapter of growth. One of my favorite things as a senior analyst was developing new analysts, so I was very excited for my role here. For today's panel, I'm joined by 3 Academy associates. We'll be discussing how to best prepare for the Academy. My number one piece of advice is begin investing on your own. So what does that mean? Start by picking a few companies in the same industry to build a financial model on, and subsequently follow them over the course of several months. I think there are a lot of great lessons that you'll learn as you go through that iterative process. So let's begin with a few introductions.
Hi, my name is Martin Blonowski. I'm an Academy associate from the Winter 23 class. I went to Northeastern University where I studied finance, accounting, and management information systems. I've been here at the firm since February, and I'm now on my first rotation.
Hi, my name is Cherry Mubarthi. I went to the University of Pennsylvania and studied computational biology and economics. I was in the winter 2023 class with Martin, and I'm also in my first rotation.
Hi, my name is Victor Rigo. I went to NYU where I studied finance and computer science, and I'm one class behind Marty and Sherry in the summer 2023 class.
Before we even get to preparation, I'd like to hear how you all got interested in investing. We think of passion as being an important part of our recruiting process. How did that develop for you?
Yeah, so back in 2014, a consumer electronics company I'd followed and I was a big fan of had done an IPO, and there was an allocation for customers to buy some. And so following the process and getting involved was really exciting for me. And that kind of sparked the interest in stocks. And that kind of resurfaced again for me in college, where I began reselling sneakers. I just enjoyed the challenge of trying to beat someone else to the sneaker and to get paid for it. And so I like the competitiveness in that. I think that alongside my college internship experiences kind of drew me to an investing seat.
Yeah. And for me, I came into college not necessarily knowing what I wanted to do. So I really found investing through a process of trial and error. But where I developed my passion was through the investing groups at school. Really, it was just finding that community and mentorship of being able to enter a space every week where you're just talking about different businesses that excited you, your outlook on these businesses, and just having that community again to give you mentorship, feedback, just even talk about certain books. I think throughout that entire process and doing stock pitch competitions and getting feedback from professionals, I realized like this was something that I really loved doing, just diving in deeper into really a system that people have built that generates quote unquote value for the world. So investing seemed like a great place to kick off my career.
Yeah, for me, it started, I think, in 5th grade. My math teacher wanted to teach us the idea of compound interest and how over time, like, the numbers could get really big. We didn't really know what any of it meant. So she made us do a Florida stock market challenge. So I think that was like the first time I was ever exposed to it. And she pushed us to try to pick one company and to read a bit about the company, even to maybe look at financials, even though we had no idea what we were even looking at. So I started there, really enjoyed that. And then through conversations with my parents and over time started, like Brian had mentioned, investing on my own, and through that you learn and you start following specific companies. And I started with like the company that most people start, and then over time my interests have also changed, and that's the fun part where you can go where you are interested in.
So talk to me about how you found out about the Academy and your path to your role today.
At Northeastern, we had a co-op program where you got to try out a couple different areas you were interested in. And actually, I was on my second rotation with Goldman Sachs, and I was in the private wealth business, but found that was a really great experience, but a little far removed from the markets. And I wanted to be closer to the actual investing side of the business, where people were not just managing the wealth, but acting on their ideas and expressing their views in the market. And so went back to the job market to try to find an opportunity like that, and found the Point72 Academy was really unmatched in terms of what they were offering in terms of development for junior folks. And so that really drew me in, applied, and thankfully started out my time here of the summer internship last year.
Yeah, so I participated in the Point72 sophomore year stock pitch competition. Me and 2 other friends did it, had a great time, and we ended up all getting return offers through that experience. And so that's how I actually ended up joining the internship program. And I think throughout that initial pitch competition, that was a great opportunity for me to just interact with the coaches, interact with the Academy associates. And they had us come into the office and fly in for about 2 days. And so that was just the interaction with the firm and the people there sort of drew me to it.
Point72 was doing a firm overview presentation at NYU through our Career Center. It was a virtual presentation. I signed up and I knew I wanted to be doing something close to the markets. I thought that was going to be investing in equities, but I wasn't 100% sure yet, because I also didn't know how much opportunities were out there in terms of doing this job from undergrad. It's a pretty unique job to be able to do just from undergrad. But I went to that presentation. I really liked what they were talking about and the program that they had available. And because of that, they said that if you were interested to apply for a coffee chat with a recruiter. So I did that. And then ultimately, they recommended I applied for the accelerator program, which was a 2-week program. And I had a really good experience doing that. And because of that, ultimately, is why I decided to apply.
Going back to those first few interviews with the Academy team, what were you doing to brush up and be ready there?
So I had prepared for a couple of interviews at that point, just for the programs I'd done through my university. And I started by thinking about what kind of questions I would ask myself in that interview. Once you understand what the business does to some extent, you can imagine the kind of questions you might get. And and take some time to practice those so that you don't sound silly under pressure. I think I spent more time than usual for this interview thinking about why I was so interested in the opportunity and what had motivated me to apply in the first place, and thinking about the experiences I had that built up to applying here.
Yeah, so echoing what Marty said, adding on, there were three things that I primarily focused on. One was making sure I had 1 to 2 businesses that I could talk deeply about, maybe showcasing that I understood their financials as well as how they operated and what makes them interesting. The second was really conveying that I had done my homework on the space. I think a lot of undergrads, especially ones that are interested in finance, hear a lot about investment banking, but don't necessarily understand the structure of the hedge fund world. And then third was just really conveying again that I understood what the day-to-day role looked like. This is really a marathon and not a sprint where you're just doing like a stock pitch competition a day. And I think that goes back to what Martin said about conveying your why and making sure that is really communicated clearly.
Yeah, and for me, I think the first interview I had with the firm happened to be beginning of sophomore year. So I'd say technically I was still weak on some of my hard skills, but I had been following a group of companies for a while that I really liked and that I thought I understood the businesses pretty well. So I think having those prepared to talk about, while echoing also what Marty and Sherry have said about really understanding why you want this specific job relative to maybe another type of investing role or even another finance role. So building those why with also a deep passion for, I guess, the companies that you're following and an understanding of the basic fundamentals of those business were the ways I prepared.
And then once you were accepted into the summer internship, what did you do in the months leading up to the first day to set yourself up for success?
There were several things. I think the Academy does a great job sending out a pre-work packet that you'll have with some reading and modeling exercises to get you up to speed. But I found it was really helpful to continue doing my own diligence on the business and the industry. I think it's helpful to understand some of the theory and the history of the space. And presumably on the internship, you can expect to be pitching stocks. So following the markets and kind of understanding what the key themes are in the months leading up to the program will just set you up to quicker develop an idea during the pitch process.
In addition to doing the pre-work that the Academy sent out, there was also a reading list that we got. And that was really just to familiarize yourself, again, like Martin said, with the industry. And I think finally, it was really just getting used to keeping up with certain companies every single day versus when you're just interested in them. That was something different that I didn't used to do before, that I sort of got myself into the habit of doing before the internship started.
I was fortunate to have a couple of classes that I could take at school, which gave me a framework, I guess, to how to think about maybe valuation or accounting, which was pretty helpful because you'll be taught it in the academy, but when you're not seeing it for the first time, it allows you to go deeper in the conversations you're having with the coaches or analysts or PMs on the platform as well. And then also echoing what Sherry and Martin have said, just continue to monitor a certain coverage list that I was interested in and doing that more frequently and trying to distinct what was just a market move versus why a company was moving that wasn't necessarily a market move.
So the 8-week summer internship is a preview and a precursor to the full-time academy program. What aspects of the internship experience convinced you that an investing journey is the one for you? And most importantly, that returning as an Academy associate was the first step in that journey.
Yeah, I think there's two parts for me. First was the rotation experience, I think, is what everyone gets really excited about. You get a good glimpse at life on the desk, what that would look like on the other side. You meet a lot of really inspiring and exciting people along the way. I think that's one theme that I've been consistent with here is I've always met people who've kind of been the highest caliber, and it's exciting to surround yourself with those kinds of people. I think those two things combined, it becomes a pretty easy sell to come back.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I think the rotation is always a really exciting part of the internship, just sort of given an opportunity to hear about how portfolio managers and investment professionals are talking about businesses and the depths to which they are able to really analyze numbers and really craft a story from those numbers that maybe you, who is also looking at the same data, might not have picked up. I thought that was extremely fascinating. But two, I think it also sort of taught me that this is a really long development process and you really have to have the people to invest in you and mentor you to get you to that level. And I think it made clear to me more than ever that taking nine months of time, that's just protected time for you to learn, is really rare in this industry. First of all, where you don't have to worry about your track record for that period of time, but also that I did personally need that 9 months to help me ramp and sort of start to build that confidence and sort of that skill set to hopefully one day get to that level.
Yeah, for me, it was two parts. The rotation was a great experience. Learned a lot about an industry I had never looked at, and the team really taught me a lot in 3 weeks. But at the same time, I came away from it realizing that I was missing a couple tools and skill sets that, going back to the academy for the second half of the summer, the coaches really helped me develop, and also which then led me to think how much I could learn in the full 9-month program.
All of you received return offers at the end of your internship. What did you do during senior year to balance finishing strong academically with coming in prepared for the academy curriculum?
I did the internship at the end of my 4th year and came back to campus for one semester of a 5th year. And I realized I had to take a lot of learning into my own hands if I wanted to stay sharp in time for the full-time program. So I spent a lot of time, again, reading more books on the space, on the industry, the theory, and trying to just stay in touch with markets. I mean, you pitch ideas during your summer here, and it's one thing to just follow those and see those stories kind of materialize, but also try to pick up some new ideas and just stay immersed in it and not lose the tempo that I think the summer internship kind of gets you on.
A lot of my curriculum during that gap before I started my academy was a lot of my computational biology classes, which weren't very finance leaning. So for me, I went and got a part-time internship at a different fund. And that was really exciting too, because it gave me that touch point of keeping up with the markets and being able to pitch ideas and receiving feedback. It also just allowed me to explore a different philosophy of investing and see if I like that. And while I learned a lot from it, it actually sort of reinforced the idea that this long-short equity was what I wanted to do.
My senior year was split between spending the first half of it in London, where I got to experience, I think, a different style of learning, especially in a management class that I took over there. It was very different, I think, than the focus back here in the US. And then the second half of my senior year was back here in New York, where I took some domain-specific classes in machine learning and computational biology, and as well as more finance classes, just to keep those skills refined, while at the same time keeping up with the markets on the side outside of school.
What were some of the surprises going from the internship to the full-time program?
I think when you're an intern, you're surrounded by new people. You probably won't know most of the people in your class, and maybe you have some friends at the end. But what surprised me most about the full-time program was the bond you kind of build with your class. You take on a lot of challenges together. You spend a lot of time together. And I think it's underappreciated just how close you get with the folks you work with and how much more robust that makes this whole experience. And so I know, having just finished up the kind of academic part of the academy, that I left with some really, really great friends who have kind of been here for my professional journey. And we share all of our experiences and continue to stay in touch as we go on rotation.
Yeah, definitely agree with what Martin said. I think adding on to that is also just, I think, being able to go through the academy with a group of peers. Obviously, the friendships are extremely tight and you're there to emotionally support each other along the way. But also, I think more so from a skill set point of view, you get exposure to a diverse set of skill sets from your peers, and you sort of are able to cultivate some of those things that work for you. And I think that also helps you think about things in a way that you might not have even thought about before. And I think that's extremely valuable.
Most of my class came from the summer internship. So from day one, we already knew each other. And from day one, it's been, let's learn from each other. Let's get through this together. And then another key thing has just been the investment from the coaches and from the firm. I knew this even in the summer. It was a huge investment, but our summer class was pretty large. And when you do the full-time program, it tends to be a bit smaller just because it's split out through different cohorts throughout the year. So you get a lot of individualized attention, which I think has been really good for learning and iterating on my process.
What did you learn about life in the hedge fund industry that you didn't know before or didn't expect?
I think you get a little bit of a look at it through the rotation, but this isn't a day job. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had. Once you really get immersed in the markets. There's no getting out. The companies that you begin to follow and the news that you're interested in, that comes out at all times of day. And so you never really stop thinking about it. I think you're definitely immersed in your coverage and your ideas all the time.
And then for me, it's more so that for someone who's intellectually curious, I didn't realize to what extent this job really enables you to learn a little bit about what's happening around the world. And for me, that's really enriched a lot of the conversations that I have outside of work, where I'm actually able to, maybe if someone says that they are operating in a certain space or like they have an interest in a certain space, I'm able to have more of an educated conversation with them about certain topics. And it's kind of amazing how a lot of folks at the firm know a little bit about everything, even outside of their coverage.
Here, I love how everyone still has to do the work. Everyone has to build their own conviction, but then you get to talk about your ideas and you don't even have to agree with one another, but at least you can see other people's perspectives and see what they're thinking and how it might differ from how you're thinking. And I think that really allows you to get into some healthy debate over where you could be wrong, where you could be right. So I really enjoyed that, and I didn't expect that coming in.
The culmination of the Academy program is a rotation on an investment team. How did you prepare for this challenge?
I think you get a lot of preparation in the interview process. So you get a lot of good ideas of what you're going to be involved in, the team you're going to be working with. And so the better you are about your interviewing the PM team while they're interviewing you, helps you kind of get the idea of what you need to be prepared for. The Academy does a really great job of also kind of covering the basis in terms of what you should be prepared to do on your team, and really reinforces good habits over the course of your 6 months here with the Academy team. You build a lot of really good habits. I think the bulk of the preparation is really done. It's just fine tuning that to kind of the team's expectations.
Yeah, completely agree with what Martin said. I think Academy does a really great job of making sure you're prepared for even maybe some of the unexpected tasks that you would have to do, such as certain side projects that come along that might not be initially part of the plan. And I think having that sort of built up that muscle to handle some of these unexpected situations has been extremely valuable on the rotations. And so far, really, there hasn't been anything that has been a surprise, because the Academy curriculum has done a fantastic job of preparing me for that. And more so, I think one additional tip, going off of what Martin said, was to really think through the questions that you want to sort of ask your PM or your senior analyst during that interview process. I think that gives you a lot of visibility into whether the team is a good fit for you, whether the communication styles are similar, and whether the way that they think about businesses in general is something that you can get behind.
And Victor, your rotation is a few months away. How are you thinking about that today?
Yeah, it's been great to see Martin, Sherry, and some of the other people in the winter class go through this process and see how they've thought about it. I think I still have a lot to learn before I would feel comfortable being on a team, but I'm excited to learn and practice those skills over the next couple months, and then ultimately start having those conversations with the PM teams and really hone in what I'm looking for, while at the same time understanding what they're looking for, as they're even within the firm, there are a bunch of different styles.
Each year, our Academy classes are composed of students from different walks of life and educational backgrounds, not just limited to finance. How do you recommend they approach an investing career?
I certainly didn't have a job at a hedge fund in the cards for me during my first 2 years of college. It wasn't even something on my radar. So I think the best piece of advice I got, and that brought me here, was keeping an open mind. I think that whatever background you're from, there is a few common characteristics I've found amongst people here at Point72. And if you're curious and you're driven and you like being right, no matter what you studied in college or where you come from, I think this seat can be really exciting for people with a very, very wide array of skills.
Yeah, I think one of the beauties of this job is that there is so many ways to do things. And I think that was that's something that a lot of people tell you. But for me personally, when I was interviewing for rotations and getting a chance to talk to all these different portfolio managers, you really see that all these quote unquote successful people have very different ways of doing things. And that's almost quite liberating, because I think what that enables you to do is find strategies and find strategies that really work for you as an individual and cater to your strengths, while also just being willing to take feedback and iterating over that constantly. And I think the last thing is also just having a lot of grit. This is a long developmental journey, and it's not easy to get there overnight. You definitely won't get there overnight. So it's really just having the patience to do that and being willing to patiently, again, get in those reps to hopefully get you there one day.
Yeah, I agree with what Marty and Sherry have said. I think coming from a different background, especially if you're worried that you didn't have the certain classes that you think you might need to have exposure in school, I think that could actually be an advantage. You'll come here, they'll give you all the tools and skill sets you need. It might not be an easy first months because you might be the other people in your class might have already learned those skills, but as long as you're willing to commit the time, you can learn them here while still having a huge amount of domain expertise in maybe something else that you did study, which I think could be very valuable, especially as the business progressively becomes more specialized.
Martin, Sherry, Victor, thank you all for coming and sharing your experiences. I think that was a valuable perspective and great advice for our listeners.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Jamie Goodfriend, and this is Becoming a Hedge Fund Analyst inside Point72 Academy. Listen to our entire series to hear from portfolio managers, analysts, and others on the ins and outs of this industry and learn how you can become a part of it. Visit our website at point72.com/academy to learn more about how we are training the next generation of investors.